Hi, everyone. I'm here with Erin Smith, an award winning creative executive with 20 plus years of experience leading transformative brand campaigns and building high performing creative teams. Drawing on her background in professional theater, she crafts emotionally resonant storytelling that engages diverse audiences while driving measurable business results. Erin is passionate about mentoring teams, embracing emerging technologies and AI, and helping organizations amplify their brand voice in today's fast changing landscape. So nice to have you here today, Aaron.
Thank you so much for having me, John.
Yeah, so we were talking a little bit before, and just in the preamble there, and we were talking just about that people don't really understand what creative does. When you hear marketing now, I mean, I think marketing in large part has become sales enablement in terms of get me those leads, get me those. We need the waterfall, we need the pipeline. I mean, that's what people seem to be paying for. And I would say 8 out of 10 searches that we get as an exec search firm in marketing is the performance, the demand gen people. That's what everyone's paying to find, right? And so I like to shine the light maybe today on creative marketing and how important it is and what is it? Maybe we can define that to start.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I do agree that growth is sort of the method du jour today because it has metrics tied to it. It has costs. It has tangibles that are tied to it that in creative and brand are very hard to quantify. But what creative is really is the way that I look at it and have taught my teams to look at it is we are the voice of the customer. We protect the customer as much as we can. We have to know them inside and out. And when I say inside and out, I mean psychologically, sociologically, what do they like? What do they dislike? How do we tell them about this product and what it can do for them versus us saying, hey, you need our product? With creative, I know a lot of executives feel like they throw something into a black box and all of a sudden this thing comes out at the end. And that's very scary for a lot of, the CFO types and the CEO types. But really what creative is it's figuring out how to reach people on a level that bypasses a lot of the logic and makes them have an emotional connection to your brand. And I think that's something that has been kind of cut out of the process because of this focus on growth and like sales led growth versus product led growth, that we're very much changing the idea of creativity as being something that is a nice to have or something that is not necessary at all to move business forward. And I think we're starting to see the shift where brand is becoming even more and more visible and important because we went too far in the other direction.
Yeah, I guess we went too far in the lead gen where companies just completely forgot about any kind of brand building, startups in particular, right? And then I think you mentioned before, you're like, oh, they're going to duct tape brand on after, right?
Yeah.
You tell me a little bit about where startups make a mistake with that? Like, I guess obviously in a startup, you need to show revenue. So I understand the stress of like, hey, I mean, for us as well, we need the revenue right away, but overlooking that important aspect, like it's kind of hard to pivot later, right?
Yeah, it's very hard to pivot later. And the thing that I constantly tell people who ask me advice about what should we bring in, they're always looking at design. They want product design first, then they want graphic design or design systems for how they're going to advertise. But what's missing from that is that what's the emotional lever or what's the thing that is going to make someone remember who you are? And for me, brand in that sense is it's the core. It's the thing that you need to establish early on. So as your product changes, as your brand changes, as your audience expands, as you scale, that's still very clear. And you can change the look and feel, you can change the voice and tone, but your brand stays true. And I think one of the big things that startups forget about is they focus so much on the product and they focus so much on making that just the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. But then it goes to market and nobody is interested in it because at the end of the day, you buy the brand. You can have every single data point, logistical reason for you to buy a product, right? it's the best in the market. It does this. It has this kind of return, blah, blah, blah. But if you're against some other company that has a really strong brand, 8 times out of 10, they're going to go for the strong brand. They just are.
Yeah, I remember when we were doing like experiential marketing back in the day, a good example was the yogurt aisle.
Mhm.
You go into the yogurt aisle, there's literally so much choice.
Mhm.
Like I think there was over 1,000 different types of yogurt. It was insane. And we had brought in a new product and we were launching sampling across the country for that product, right? And the big thing was, how do we differentiate in a sea of overwhelming choice,
Mhm.
where a lot of people typically will go to the aisle, they'll be overwhelmed because they're like, holy smokes, what am I buying? And then they'll just look for, as you said, they'll look for the most recognized brand in their head. Okay,
Mhm.
you'll play or whatever, because just because they know the brand, not because they're choosing anything. It's just like, I'm like, I don't want to make a choice here. This is too much choice. I don't have the time to go through all these options, and they
Mhm.
grab for what they know, right?
Yeah.
They had studies for the same thing when it came to like dishwashing detergent, where people literally would buy Tide their whole life. And
Yeah.
they were so stuck, they were like kind of sticky to the brand, where it's like they're always going to just buy Tide. My mom used Tide. I remember the smell growing up. I'm stuck to it, right? And now I'm reaching for Tide every time I go there, just out of habit, even though there's probably maybe better products out there or cheaper products out there. And to get them to make that choice, the demoing process would help, because by actually trying something new,
Mhm.
and you can't really try Tide obviously, but for a food product, right? You would try it and immediately you'd have a connection to the product, right? It's one of the things we did in cell phone sales. Put the cell phone in someone's hand, immediately make them play with it, feel a sense of ownership, and then they may purchase that product, right?
Yeah.
So on the creative side is like, getting a visceral kind of response is what you're looking for, because yeah, people are on autopilot. They have their set kind of buying patterns. They're creatures of habit. It's hard to break through, especially in certain categories where either not that much choice, there's only a few players, or too much choice. And I guess in tech startups in particular, I could say the big thing right now would be an AI startup. There's literally over 3,000 AI startups, and
Not more.
it all seems like the same kind of stuff coming
Yeah.
at you, right?
Yeah, and it's that's what the creative team is focused on. The creative team is focused on how do we make that particular brand of yogurt in a sea of options become the only choice. That's what makes that team valuable and creative valuable is we're not just thinking about shelf placement. We're not just thinking about, we're letting the sales teams do their thing and get that product on shelf and in a good spot. But once it's there, how do we convince people to buy it? I get a lot of whenever I start working somewhere and they're like, I want to be the next liquid death of AI. I'm like, here's the thing about liquid death. They have an incredibly strong brand. It is very, very strong. It is very different than anything on the market. It is canned water. But because they have allowed their brand to be absolutely off the wall, to have this high production value and this really fast cultural moment commentary, people know Liquid Death and they buy the can because it looks cool and they buy the product because they're like, oh yeah, they're really funny. And so whenever I have a CMO or a CEO ask me, well, how do we become the Liquid Death of blank? I'm like, well, first you need to figure out what your brand is because you can't just start doing like crazy productions or bring in, an incredible video team that can crank stuff out very quickly. You have to have an idea. You have to have a platform. And if you don't have that, then you're just burning cash.
Yeah, and I guess in the creative process, in a sense, has become a little bit commoditized, right? And we've seen just like how the market's responded a little bit to that. Why do you think that is? I mean, I know like a lot of different things are becoming commoditized now, even recruitment to a certain extent.
Mhm.
When we're trying to get away from that transactional type of business ourselves, right? But on the creative side, like when you can go to Fiverr and all these other, let's say consulting kind of websites and find low cost labor overseas and so on, right? It's like, how do you differentiate? How do you get out of that? How do you show value where in creative it can be difficult to show value directly sometimes in terms of KPI and whatnot, like compared to lead gen, right? So what do you think that creatives need to do to sort of show their value and not get sort of stuck in that, what's your hourly rate type racket,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of layers there, but I think one of the biggest things is what I think is going to completely differentiate the creatives that survive this AI boom versus the creatives that maybe don't is taste. And one of the things that companies who really understand how important brand is, or even have a understanding of how important brand is, know that what they're buying with that person is not necessarily the campaign. It's not necessarily their ability to talk metrics. It's their taste level. It's their ability to have a vision and execute it. Now, creative process and agencies started to put together all of these very, TM, this is our process, because they were competing against other agencies that were going through that. And copywriting became content right around 2013, 2014. It suddenly became, what's the engine behind it? How are we creating content? Oh, it's SEO, or how are we doing this? It's thought leadership, and we're placing it here, and we're placing it here. But what was lost in that, when everything switched to this, we have 85 channels now instead of 4, is that the idea needs to go through all of those channels. And something that I tell creatives is a bottom of funnel demand gen conversion ad is still a brand placement. There's no difference between them. Brand awareness is where you get to do the big shiny and really hit on the emotions. But even going down the funnel, that's an emotional funnel. You have the top of funnel, you have the middle of funnel, you have the bottom of funnel. And what you're doing is you're answering emotional questions. So with brand, it's like, who are you? What are you? I'm not aware of you. Then the next one is, okay, so you say you can help me. How can you help me? And then the bottom is, all right, I want help. Sign me up. So you have to continue thinking through that. Yes, you may be cranking out a lot of demand gen, and yes, you may be cranking out a lot of SEO and content, but the brand needs to be present in all of it.
Yeah, there's got to be that through line with everything you do. Every impression that you put out there in your marketing has to have some kind of cohesiveness. And I think it can be lost sometimes when you're just trying different things or you're hiring a different agency every month because no one's being able to crack the code for
Hmm.
the lead gen, right? What they're trying to do. And we've seen that on the tenure, right? So you look at marketing executives now, their tenure in the C level is like 18 months.
Yeah, it's very.
And a big part of that maybe is lack of alignment between the CEO and the head of marketing. They're just the CEO has maybe either unrealistic expectations or they're not aligned with them in terms of what actions should be done.
Hmm.
Um, and I think also maybe there's a lack of understanding of the function in general, right? There's sort of that, well, you guys, get me leads and just get out there. And yes, we got to build brand, sure, but we don't have time for that right now, and or we don't have money for that,
Hmm.
or can you do it cheaper? And that's where the
Yeah. Faster,
commodification.
cheaper. Yes. Faster, cheaper, better, always.
Maybe talk a little bit about that because we had some comments. I think the CEO of Blackstone came out. You had mentioned it before, right? What did they say, and what did you gather from all that?
Yeah. So I can't take credit for finding this. A colleague of mine on LinkedIn found this, but the CEO of Blackstone came out at his shareholder conference and he showed 2 different commercials. The first one was one where they did the whole real film process, traditional advertising. They came up with the idea, they wrote the script, they flew out to shoot it, they hired real talent, they paid all the rights, etc. And then he showed a version of that commercial that was made with a couple of people two flights above him, um, in a few hours. And the point that he tried to make was, this commercial cost us $1 million, whereas this one cost us basically nothing. And look, they're they're the same. They're like, we should just be doing AI. What he missed, and what I think a lot of CEOs miss, and even CMOs today, because a lot more of them are coming up through growth, that $1 million commercial, he took the idea and copied it in AI. So, yes, it was done in a matter of hours, but it was already done. They just put it through an AI, a Midjourney or a Soros or whatever. And so, what he's missing is the point of creative. Creative is not just about making a big shiny thing and making it really fast and just putting things out there that don't really make any sense. That $1 million ad probably brought them more revenue because there was an idea and a story and authenticity behind it. OpenAI just released a bunch of commercials. I think Mother did them. I could be wrong, but they made a point to use 35 millimeter film, real actors. They very much used kind of that documentary style, real life look and feel. And they're advertising AI. And there's a reason for that. It's very, very clear that the strategist was like, people are afraid of AI. They think it's going to take their jobs. They don't see a value in it. They don't understand how it's going to be used. And so what we need to do is just base it in reality. And we're going to base it so far in reality that we're going to use film. We're going to use real actors. We're going to use this documentary style to humanize it. And I think when it comes to CEOs and CMOs and their short tenure on the CMO side, there's an expectation of immediate revenue anytime you do creative, because creative and marketing are cost centers and they don't get a lot of credit for the amount of revenue they bring in. Creative to me is not a cost center. Creative to me is an investment. So whenever a CMO comes in and they try and change everything around and they're pushing a new vision and it doesn't get the ROI immediately within a year because brand takes longer than a year to establish, they're out. And then you have someone come in and do it all over again. And a lot of CEOs and CPOs and CFOs will be like, well, creative doesn't have any value because we just keep doing it over and over and we don't see the results. And it's like, because you keep doing it over and over and you don't stick with it.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that. Let's say for someone that's, a CEO at a company right now, they're hearing this and they're like, okay, so we got to take the time to build. What would you say would be the long-term benefits of, and how much budget would you say would you want to split between, let's say, short-term lead gen activities and creative? How would you split a budget if you had $100,000? Just hypothetical situation here.
If I had $100,000, I would ask for more money.
Of course.
I would
Yeah,
say
$100 million. You have a huge
$100,000,000
budget. Yeah,
to
we're
do
big
whatever you
ballers
wanted.
there. We got 100 million to spend. Where are we going to spend it?
What startup is this? I want to work for them.
Not a startup.
Um,
No, they're established
the
companies. Yeah.
established as still, I would like to work for them. Um, I think for me, I think demand gen and sales enablement have to have a lot of investment and should always be running. Very much so. But I also think it should be used as in an in-play experimental space so that you can A/B test your ideas. You can use some different language and see which one is actually getting the most engagement. You can use different photography, things of that nature. Demand gen to me should be a testing environment for creative. Sales enablement too. Like with sales enablement and sales leaders, they just want to be able to come into a room where they're selling the product and the customer already knows their product. They're just coming in to make sure that they're signing on the dotted line. In order to do that, you got to have brand. And I would say, depending on where you are in the phase of your business, if you have zero brand established, I would spend 60 to 70% of that budget on establishing your brand. And what I mean by that is the brand strategy, the voice and tone of what your brand is, the look and feel of what your brand is, and the DNA of what your brand is. Like, what is the one sentence that you're going into a pitch meeting with? It's like, this is what we are. You need that core in order to be able to ramp up your demand gen. Because if you can really settle on who you are as a brand, what you make, and how you sell it, then you can ramp demand gen to be more impactful. But if you're trying to ramp with just demand gen at the beginning and then working on, oh, we got to do brand awareness, it's a much, much harder road to go down. And it's a big reason why a lot of CMOs only have an 18-month tenure.
Yeah, it's like almost like building the foundation of the house, right? You build the foundation and then you can put all the fun stuff like the jacuzzi in the backyard
Yeah.
and whatnot. So
Yeah.
makes sense.
And it's also, where are you building that house? It's beyond just building that foundation. It's really looking at like taking a big step back and going, who is buying this? Who needs it? Why are we making it? If the reason you're making it is because you want to make it rich from the AI boom, probably not going to succeed, quite frankly. But if you're making it because you know that there's a product market fit and you need to be able to tell that story of why it's a product market fit, why it's different than all these other AI startups, then that's brand.
No, I totally get that. And I think it's definitely often overlooked. We see that every day in just activities that we are engaged with, right? I think maybe also it's the fact that advocating for programs and being able to marketers are not always the best at advocating in terms of why to do it, what not only the short term but the longer term implications of what you're doing. I mean, and I think also people are I mean, it's funny because when there's a good brand that goes out there, like when Apple goes out, or they had some amazing campaigns in the past that I still remember. But then you also see some bad campaigns that come out. When you see bad ones, you're like, see, they spent so much money. Like this was a perfect example to me recently was Cracker Barrel, right? They spent a lot of money with an agency. I mean, I understand they want to modernize the restaurants because they were old school restaurants. Let's say they want to modernize the brand, bring in new customers, right, and so on.
Mhm.
That was, at least I think that was the idea. And then they changed the logo. The new logo, I mean, it looked like someone created with AI, but I don't know. Uh, I'm pretty sure they made it with AI. But anyways, um, yeah, what do you have to say about that situation? And then people then use that as an example of, oh, see, look, they hire this big agency and look what they got and look at the disaster that caused, right?
Yep, yep. I mean, the Cracker Barrel logo is a prime example of what I call the blandification of brand. It kind of started with the Balenciaga YCL when everybody went to that sans serif typeface, made it really plain, stripped away a lot of the color and the interest to be these like high-end luxury products. Well, in the design first world, what's been happening is everything has to be internet safe, which basically means you have to use a Google font if you want to do international marketing. It has to be really simple. It has to be really bold and graphic, as opposed to the Cracker Barrel logo originally was not very easy to see on web. It wasn't easy to see digitally. It wasn't easy to scale down. So there's those types of things. But the mistake that I think they made is they really forgot their customer. The people that go to a Cracker Barrel, and I grew up going to Cracker Barrel anytime we were going on vacation to Florida, we stopped at a Cracker Barrel and that was the thing. The people who frequented there, they went because it was warm and cozy and because it felt like they were going to their grandma's house, or it was a little slice of what people think Southern hospitality is and what Southern comfort food is. And that's a very food, especially, is an extremely emotional experience. And they stripped everything out of that logo. And a lot of design firms will basically sell that idea of, well, we're going to make this so it's completely scalable across all your platforms. Here's our thought behind it. Here's why we're using this. Look at what the shape of the S is doing. It mirrors this. And you get sold on that thinking, but you don't remember who your core customer is. And so I think Cracker Barrel was that prime example of what's been happening with brand and creative, where it's just being made to be digitally safe and it's made to be shrunk down to an 8 by 8, you know, 8 pixel by 8 pixel square so that it can go into a product. And to me, again, that's just overcompensating for the new channels that we have to play in and forgetting again what our brand is. I think Cracker Barrel had a really strong brand and they threw it out.
I mean, some of the stats around that were that the brand was hurting, and so I guess they thought, well, maybe we need to make a change to bring in new
Yeah.
customers, and so maybe that was at the cost of their existing customer base to do that. So it's always hard doing a reimagining or rebranding. I think it's something a lot of companies have struggled with. We've seen some huge mishaps in the news,
Well,
and
also
yeah,
the thing that creative isn't utilized for that it should be is bet there are common threads between the new customer that Cracker Barrel was trying to entice versus their current customer. And instead of trying to find those commonalities, they just went, well, our customer is modern, so we need to modernize. And what a good creative team does, because most of us are neurodivergent with ADHD and we have really great pattern recognition, is to start going, okay, well, this is the current customer base. They're chasing this customer base. One, is it the right customer base? Are we actually chasing where we need to go? And two, what are the human insights? Like I was saying earlier, food is very emotional. Is it that the country feel that needs to be more inclusive and open up to more people? How do we do that versus us going, well, this has some bad juju behind it, we're just going to go completely off in the direction of like an Applebee's? It's not going to work.
yeah. I mean, I guess too when there's also as you said, blandification. I think a lot of restaurants too have that kind of like commercial feel.
Mhm.
A lot of these chains do, whether you're going like Eastside Mario's or any of these kind of Boston pizzas and so on. Like they feel they're even though they're different brands, they feel very familiar depending on what you're going in. I'm not sure if that's intentional or not. Of like, well, you got to feel like it's the same kind of quality or level. But you're right. I know for me, when I was a kid, I had really good memories of Red Lobster and the Olive Garden,
Mhm.
of going in there.
Mhm.
And now I think maybe what Cracker Barrel did in the sense like changing up the interior. That's another thing that they didn't really mention right in the news, right? Was they did the logo, sure, but they also completely revamped the inside. And if you look at the photos, I saw the photos of like looks like a modern regular one of the
Mhm.
regular chain restaurants you go to.
Yep.
So I guess when customers see that too, that it's all modern and nice inside, they may also think, oh, now it's expensive.
Oh yeah.
It
Oh
may
yeah.
change the perception of price as well, right? Which is an entirely different thing. Is like when it looked crappy inside and old,
It
it
felt
also felt kind of affordable.
right. Yeah.
And now it looks kind of like shishi, like bougie, like, oh, are they going to charge me an extra $20 now to eat there because they have, a nice chairs.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, Cracker Barrel was, the old country store. Come sit on the porch in a rocking chair while you wait for your table, and they just wiped that out. I read an interesting article about food, especially fast food in particular, because everything is now part of these giant private equity or conglomerates. The value in a restaurant is actually the land for them. And so like the new McDonald's that all look like really out of sci-fi black boxes with black and gray. It's because they want to be able to switch in another restaurant if the McDonald's doesn't do well. And so the signage, things of that nature where everything's being stripped back so that you're basically just putting on a different sign, a different menu, and maybe some different color
Yeah,
is cost cutting.
yeah,
And that's a big reason why brand is getting cut and creative is getting cut, is because they're focused more on the short term, quarterly, KPIs and revenue reports than they are on a long-term plan for their business being successful.
That's interesting for two things. One is I totally get that. I've seen that happen where they have a very bland kind of restaurant. They switch it out. They're like, oh, the burger joint's not working there. Let's switch it in with burrito place. And they can do that overnight. You think, well, why? Oh, it's the private equity company owns a group of different restaurant chains. They can just swap them out within 30 days turnkey. They can do it. And it doesn't cost them much a remodel. Cause I remember a friend that owned a restaurant. I mean, they would charge them, I think, $500,000 every 10 years or something along those lines to do a remodel to the newest version. And it was in their contract as a franchisee that they would have to pay out of, like, the owner would have to pay out of pocket for that revamp,
Mhm.
and they would also be on a lease for 50 years on the land. And I'm not sure if you saw the movie The Founder, the
Mhm.
McDonald's founder movie. I love that movie, explaining the business model of McDonald's of owning real estate. Those real estate they keep for 100 years, the value is going up.
Mhm. Mhm.
Meanwhile, the owner operator is leasing the restaurant land, and they get the revenue from the restaurant, they get the revenue from leasing, and then they get the revenue from eventually selling the land off to a big developer that's going to use that to make a shopping mall, or who knows what they're going to do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's very ingenious. I mean, hey, it's great. You can make money many different ways,
Yep.
but I can see how that can also affect, like, the decision making about, as you said, brand or spending on creative. It's like, well, we need things that are just quick and easy swapping. We need,
Mhm.
it's universal kind of, nothing too elaborate because we're going to have to demo it and rebuild later, and we don't want to have to do that. That really kind of sucks. And I mean, I've seen that too, just in the way buildings are built. Like, you go to Europe, you see buildings that were, hundreds of years old. You can appreciate the architecture and the art, the actual artisans that had to build these places and make them all beautiful.
Mhm.
And now you drive through downtown and you see, like, boxes. That's all it
Yeah.
is box buildings, right? And it kind of it ruins the landscape.
Mhm.
And obviously, from a business standpoint, it makes sense. Of course, it's cheaper, it's, mass production and all that, but from what have we lost as a society, as a humanity, in terms of, like, the beauty and art that we used to really appreciate, like how they built the cathedral. I saw a show about that where it took them, like, hundreds of years to build the Notre Dame, right? The
Yeah.
cathedral and
Mhm.
whatnot. Hundreds. It was a multi-generational effort to build something that it was so beautiful, and that, as a society, it enriches us to have that inner society.
Mhm.
And we often, maybe because we're constantly chasing capitalism so hard, that we're not thinking about there's other things of value as well, which you can appreciate if you like the arts, or if you like to see beautiful things as you walk around.
Yep.
And so I've noticed that as well. Just, you need to walk around any major city, and you can say, what was built before 1900, and you're like, oh, look how pretty it is, and
Yeah.
probably still standing,
Yep.
versus some of the homes now where they're, plywood, and they're not going to last more than 50 years. The quality's not there either. The
Yeah.
mass
Yeah.
production has gotten
I
us.
mean, it's to me, that's a macro it's a good macro point about how art and creativity have been devalued in focus of profit, right? I used to live in San Francisco, and San Francisco went through an apartment building boom, and I swear every apartment was the same shade of orange, gray, and black, every single one. And it made me think of when in the 1950s, 60s, they were all doing like the very brutalist modern apartment buildings that you still see everywhere. And you can identify it, but it's not something that sparks inspiration. It's not a space that you want to go into and feel like there was an effort put in. And one of the things that I feel very acutely on creative teams is there's a lot of a sense of, well, they don't value what I do. So why am I putting so much effort and my heart into this work if it doesn't have any value, or if the only value is the click through rate, or the only value is how much money we're saving? And that's a big, big internal fight that a lot of creatives have when they first get into it. They're like, yeah, I'm going to make creative work and da da da. And then they're building very straightforward brochures and things of that nature. However, to me, and what I'm trying to do in my career and with my teams is let's put that effort into making something beautiful because who else is going to? And so if it's, again, if it's about this emotion, if it's about being connected to the customer, if it's about really creating something that someone's going to remember, that takes art and that takes skill and that takes a kind of thinking where you can be visionary and see around a corner. And there aren't a lot of people in business that can do that. There just aren't. And that's okay. But I really do think that creative used to shape culture. I mean, the Got Milk campaign, the Absolute campaign, the 1984 Apple campaign completely changed how people thought about the personal computer. The cultural zeitgeist is in advertising. And I think a lot of companies have started to be very afraid of that. To your point with the Budweiser example, to your point with the Cracker Barrel example,
Yeah.
they're scared, but at the same time, none of those businesses weren't a risk. There was always an inherent risk in every single business that started in this country or in the world. You are taking a risk. And so I think having those principled risks and really, accepting that something may fail and fail spectacularly is okay because you're going to get so much out of understanding what failed.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, well, that's business in the sense too. There's always going to be some risks, so you're going to make mistakes. I think maybe some things have been amplified because of social media and the way the world is now, right? Compared to how it was 10 years ago, where
Mhm.
things
Mhm.
are just it goes viral and everybody talks about it. But the good news is the news cycle, it doesn't last that long. It really doesn't. We talk about it. I can just think of like the news cycle. It's like, okay, for 5 days we talked about this. Before that, there was something, oh, Taylor Swift got proposed to, or like, and
Yeah, that
before
was
that, like, and I've seen too a lot of these companies recover too. It's not forever. You haven't burned your rep forever. They can quickly, oh, we made a mistake and here's a quick fix, and where's Cindy Sweeney to come in and save the day on a brand? There's things you can do to sort of fix if you made a mistake with your customers, right? So yeah, I think if we're not willing to take risks, then it becomes bland, and maybe that's also a differentiator for brands out there, right? That are like, okay, if everybody's playing it safe, and you're the one that's like, we're just gonna go for it, just
Mhm.
swing for the hills here, then maybe that's also there's a higher upside for you because no one else is risking their neck,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So if everyone's playing it safe and doing these bland kind of stuff,
Mhm.
and here comes something crazy, like I do know that when there's a wild kind of commercial that comes out, everybody's talking about it.
Oh, yeah.
They're like, hey, did you see that commercial? That was crazy. Like,
Yeah.
so that's definitely, like, for me, one that comes stands out was the initial like Old Spice ones with the
Oh,
dude.
yeah.
Now
Massive.
people are copying it a lot. I've seen a lot of
Oh, yeah.
copycats, but initially that was like, what is this? This is ridiculous. Everyone's like, this is ridiculous how he's changing. And,
Yep.
but I remember that still. Like, those are memorable kind of moments, right? And it probably has gotten me to buy a couple of bars of Old Spice at some point,
Oh, yeah. The man your man could smell like. It's genius. And that's Wyden and Kennedy. And Wyden and Kennedy, they've been the Nike advertiser since Nike started pretty much. And the thing about Wyden is the thing that they value and treasure and give the most cachet to and the most time to is the idea. Absolutely, it's the idea. The execution, they do beautifully, but creatives sit around for a week, working 12-hour days. And a lot of people walk by a room of creatives sitting there staring at the ceiling and going, why am I paying these people? And a lot of it is because they're bouncing ideas off each other. And that's just the method. You're going to end up staring at the ceiling at some point and then going, what if we did this? And I think that's like, there was that era of advertising, Levi's campaign with the poem that came out in 2010, which for the life of me, I can't remember the poem. And then there was the Never Hide campaign from Ray-Ban where they live painted these models of all these different colors. And then they had the bright colored Ray-Bans, which was the first release of that. Uh, those are things that still last and maintain, and they were all risky. I mean, Old Spice, what, like, if you're sitting in a room and you're the CEO of Allspice and they come in and they're like, we want to have a beautiful man sitting on a horse and all of these background and clothing changes happen. And here's the lines that we're going to have him say. I mean, that's scary. Like a CEO needs to be on board and able to take a risk in
Yeah.
order to do that. And it's a risk that paid off. I think about the Real Men of Genius radio spots, which shows how old I am. But Real Man of Genius was such a great series. The Stay Thirsty, My Friends, Dos Equis campaign that
Oh
like
yeah. My
ever.
friends still quote it
Yeah.
all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. And it becomes part of that, like I said, cultural zeitgeist. And, again, when a CMO or a CEO comes to me and says, I want to be the next Liquid Death, I'm like, do you? Because that's going to be a lot of risk. And I happen to know the founder of Liquid Death because I went to ad school where he taught. And I know that his whole business model is we're going to make this crazy brand. It's not about the water, it's about the brand.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. The companies that have unlocked that
Mhm.
are untouchable almost, right? And they have power not just on their organic, but also just like the loyalty, the connection people have to the brand, where it's a lifelong connection. Yeah, that's the value. Like, try quantifying that in terms of sales. How can you tell how much? And I think where we see this most evident is in a tough economy,
Mhm.
where when people don't have much money
Mhm.
to spend, they will typically spend it on name recognized brands. It's a kind of a fact, right? Like, you're not going to risk trying something new. You're not going to you're not going to want to experiment. It's very much, I'm on a budget, so I'm only going to buy what I know, and in minimal quantities, of course. But it's just a matter of fact of how buying patterns typically are, especially the risk aversion. When you don't have a lot of money to spend, your risk goes down. That's across any kind of business, right?
Yeah. And I
So that's
mean,
where it'll save you.
it will save you. And it's also people will always talk about the key brands like Nike. Just do it. And I'm like, do you remember a specific campaign? And they're like, Jordan? I'm like, cool. But anything else? And it's not because they remember the specific campaigns or the specific taglines or, even who their sponsored athletes were. It's that they remember this brand that basically said, you can be as elite as these athletes if you work for it and if you wear our products. That's it. And so it's very much this like, yeah, where your customers continue shopping when money gets tight is the Coca-Cola versus Pepsi debate all the time. Like some people are hardcore Pepsi, some people are hardcore Coca-Cola. Why? Brand. Growing up with it, recognition, sentimentality is a big one. And I think we're forgetting a lot of that in our current marketing motions. That yes, we can have the best sales enablement, we can have the best ABM plan, we can have the best GTM, we can have the best demand gen pipeline going. But if we're not building something bigger than that, then we're going to be constantly on our back foot.
Yeah, it totally makes sense because when your ad budget dries up, then if you don't have nothing pulling people to you, then the leads also stop, as we've seen, right? And so I think with startups too, like we were talking about, how they for startups that can't afford a big creative agency, or I mean, not it's expensive, obviously to do this. Bringing in maybe a fractional creative person to at least advise or help, right, can be effective as well, right?
Very effective. I've done fractional work with brands that are getting their heads around what brand means. They have the great product. They've done a lot of maybe partner marketing or they've done content creator marketing, things of that nature. But with fractional help, you could basically bring in, executive level brand strategist for a month to sit down with your founding team and create your brand strategy for you. And then you have that there and you can decide, let's execute this or let's give it over to our design team so that they can start incorporating this into the design system. Having the option to have someone like me, for example, or a CMO or an executive creative director that's worked at these amazing agencies and really amazing tech companies, you can buy just a fraction of their time. And that fraction is actually so incredibly valuable because you're not getting 30 minutes of their time. You're getting 20 plus years of experience in 30 minutes of their time. And so investing in that and, maybe biting the bullet and upping your budget a little bit, it's still going to pay off in the long run because you're going to save money by not hiring a full agency. You're going to save money by not having to hire a full creative department before you're ready, but you will have that foundational piece so that when you are ready to scale, it's already there.
Totally makes sense. And definitely an option for a lot of companies that are just coming up and, trying to find their place, and before they start going down the road of, hiring a big agency, which can, obviously run you quite a bit of money, right?
Yeah, and lock you into a contract.
Yeah. Well, that totally makes sense. Well, we'll leave it at that because we're over time for today, but I really had a great conversation with you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, John.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right.